Behind friendly messages and carefully crafted profiles, some encounters have concealed deadly intentions waiting to unfold. These stories reveal how moments of trust turned into fear, violence, and irreversible loss. Here are 5 of the most terrifying blind dates that ended in death, each one more chilling than the last. The disappearance of McKenzie Lueck began quietly, almost invisibly. Just another young woman returning to campus after a family funeral. But within days, her silence turned into a mystery that would horrify an entire community and expose the dark underside of modern dating. McKenzie, 23, was a University of Utah student known for her warmth and energy. Friends described her as bubbly, nurturing, and full of promise. She was studying kinesiology and pre-nursing, balancing her education with sorority life and part-time work. In June 2019, after traveling home to El Segundo, California, to attend her grandmother's funeral, she flew back to Salt Lake City. It was supposed to be the end of a difficult week. Instead, it marked the beginning of a nightmare. Shortly after landing, McKenzie arranged to meet a man she had connected with through a dating website called Seeking Arrangement. The site markets itself as a platform where wealthy men, known as sugar daddies, meet young women, or sugar babies. The man was Ayoola A. Ajayi, a 32-year-old information technology worker. That night, McKenzie took a lift to a park to meet him. A minute after she sent her final text message, her phone went dark and never turned back on. What McKenzie didn't know was that Ajayi had already planned her death. According to his own attorney, Ajayi disabled the video recording function of his home security system before leaving to meet her, ensuring there would be no footage of what would happen next. After meeting in the park, the two returned to his Salt Lake City home. Once inside, Ajayi bound McKenzie and began choking her. She struggled, desperately trying to stop him. It wasn't enough. He looped a belt around her neck, forced her face down, and strangled her until she was dead. Then, in an act that stunned even seasoned investigators, Ajayi attempted to erase what he had done. He burned McKenzie's body in his backyard and buried the remains. While her family, friends, and police launched an increasingly urgent search, he went about his life, saying nothing as vigils were held and flyers were posted across the city. When detectives eventually knocked on his door to question him, Ajayi panicked. He dug up the remains from his backyard and drove nearly 100 miles north to Logan Canyon, where he buried her again in a shallow grave. Weeks later, after fragments of charred remains were discovered behind his home, Ajayi was arrested. He later led authorities to the canyon, where McKenzie was found with her arms bound behind her back. The search had lasted nearly 2 agonizing weeks. On Wednesday, more than a year after the crime, Ajayi stood in court and pleaded guilty to aggravated murder and desecration of a corpse. As part of a plea agreement, prosecutors removed the possibility of the death penalty. He now faces life in prison without the chance of parole. Charges of aggravated kidnapping and obstructing justice were dismissed. Ajayi also admitted to sexually abusing another woman he met on a dating app in 2018. According to court records, the assault occurred in his home while they were watching television. He pleaded guilty to forcible sexual abuse in that case as well. In exchange for his guilty pleas, prosecutors also dropped 19 counts related to the sexual exploitation of a minor, stemming from child pornography allegedly found on his electronic devices during the investigation into McKenzie's murder. Throughout the hearing, AJ said little. Dressed in an orange jail jumpsuit, wearing glasses and a blue surgical mask, he occasionally lowered his head, offering no explanation for his actions. Authorities have never publicly discussed a motive. Salt Lake County District Attorney Sim Gill said the guilty pleas were meant to spare McKenzie's family from the trauma of a lengthy trial and allow them a measure of closure. The family, he said, has requested privacy. Ajayi, a native of Nigeria, was living legally in the United States on a green card. He had worked in information technology for several high-profile companies and had briefly served in the Army National Guard. On the surface, his life appeared stable. Behind closed doors, it was something far darker. What began as a late-night meeting arranged through a dating app ended in betrayal, brutality, and loss. More than 5 years after her death, the murder of British backpacker Grace Millane continues to haunt New Zealand and resonate far beyond its shores. What began as a young woman's dream of adventure ended in a crime so brutal that it forced a nation to confront uncomfortable truths about violence, trust, and safety. In February 2020, a New Zealand man was sentenced to life imprisonment for killing Grace Millane, with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years. The sentencing took place in Auckland's High Court under Justice Simon Moore, bringing a grim conclusion to a case that had shocked the country and drawn international attention. The man's identity remained suppressed by court order. Grace was just 22 years old when she arrived in New Zealand in November 2018, embarking on a round-the-world journey she had eagerly planned. Friends and family described her as bright, adventurous, and full of warmth. On 2nd December 2018, while staying in Auckland, she met a man through the dating app Tinder. What should have been an ordinary date turned fatal. Grace died that night in the man's hotel room, killed by manual strangulation during sex. In court, Justice Moore described the act as intimate and cold-blooded, emphasizing the deliberate and personal nature of the violence. The judge said the man's actions demonstrated a complete disregard for Grace's life, not only in how she was killed, but in what followed. Instead of seeking help, the man embarked on a calculated effort to hide the crime. Grace's body was placed inside a suitcase and transported to the Waitakere Ranges, a remote bushland area west of Auckland, where she was buried in a shallow grave. Her remains were not discovered until 8 days later, after an extensive search that gripped the nation. Throughout his sentencing, the convicted man showed little emotion, listening impassively as the court detailed the severity of his actions. A pre-sentencing report had assessed him as being of very high risk, citing both the seriousness of the offense and his complex psychological needs. Grace's parents, David and Gillian Millane, attended the sentencing via video link from the UK. A framed photograph of Grace stood behind them, a silent reminder of the life that had been taken. Her brothers and extended family were also present, as was a packed public gallery, filled largely with young women. In a devastating victim impact statement, Gillian Millane spoke through tears, describing the overwhelming grief that had consumed her since losing her daughter. She spoke of depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts, and of days when she was unable to leave her bed or even listen to the radio. The pain, she said, was constant and unrelenting. David Millane did not speak in court, but Gillian described the impact on him as profound, explaining that her own grief had left her unable to fully support her husband. Prosecutors described the crime as personalized, depraved, and callous. Crown Prosecutor Brian Dickey told the court that the murder had deeply shaken New Zealand's sense of safety, particularly among young women, many of whom began reevaluating their dating lives and personal security in its aftermath. The prosecution also pointed to the man's behavior after Grace's death, including explicit material found on his devices and photographs taken after she had died, as further evidence of depravity. His methodical disposal of her body, Dickey said, marked the case as one of exceptional cruelty in New Zealand's history. The defense argued for a lighter sentence, citing the man's age, lack of prior serious convictions, and difficult upbringing. They claimed he could be rehabilitated. The jury, and later the court, rejected that argument. Grace Millane's murder sent shockwaves through a country unaccustomed to such violence. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern publicly apologized to Grace's family, saying their daughter should have been safe in New Zealand, and that she was sorry she wasn't. A 34-year-old man was charged with carrying out a chilling series of violent crimes after authorities determined he had used an online dating app to lure his victims into deadly encounters. Prosecutors said the suspect preyed on men who believed they were meeting for companionship, only to be ambushed by extreme and senseless violence. Los Angeles County District Attorney Nathan J. Hochman described the alleged crimes as calculated and predatory, urging the public to consider the fear experienced by the victims in their final moments. He said the men had been deceived into believing they were meeting someone for an innocent purpose, only to be confronted with terror and brutality. According to Hoshman, the attacks demonstrated a complete disregard for human life. He credited the persistence and coordination of investigators from the Los Angeles Police Department and the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department for bringing the alleged suspect to justice and preventing further harm. The accused, Rockim Prowell of Inglewood, born December 18, 1990, was charged in case number 25 CJO-CF05804 with 2 counts of murder, accompanied by a special circumstance allegation involving multiple victims. Prosecutors also charged him with 1 count of attempted murder, 2 counts of carjacking, 2 counts of second-degree burglary, and 1 count of assault with a deadly weapon. Authorities said the charges reflected a pattern of escalating violence that spanned several years. Prowell was scheduled to be arraigned in Department 30 of the Clara Shortridge Foltz Criminal Justice Center. The first known killing allegedly occurred on July 20, 2021. On that day, 51-year-old Miguel Angel King met Prowell after the 2 men had communicated through an online dating app. Investigators said King believed he was meeting someone he had connected with digitally. Instead, prosecutors alleged Prowell fatally shot him and stole his vehicle. More than a week later, King's car was located several miles from Prowell's residence. Forensic evidence recovered from inside the vehicle linked Prowell directly to the killing, according to investigators. Nearly a month after King vanished, his remains were discovered on August 14, 2021, in the Angeles National Forest, bringing a grim end to the search for the missing man. 2 years later, authorities said the pattern repeated itself. On August 21, 2023, 53-year-old Robert Gutierrez arranged to meet Prowell at a location roughly 1 mile from the suspect's home. Like the previous victim, Gutierrez had also interacted with Prowell on the same dating platform. When Gutierrez failed to return home, his family reported him missing 2 days after the meeting. Despite extensive efforts, his body was never located. However, when investigators arrested Prowell in connection with the earlier homicide, they discovered Gutierrez's vehicle parked inside the defendant's garage. Prosecutors said additional physical and circumstantial evidence tied Prowell to Gutierrez's presumed killing, strengthening the case against him. The violence did not end there. On February 22, 2025, Prowell allegedly connected with another man through the same dating app. The 2 agreed to meet approximately 4 miles from Prowell's residence. According to authorities, the encounter quickly turned violent. Prosecutors allege that Prowell bound the 40-year-old victim, stole his wallet, and repeatedly beat him with a baseball bat. Despite his injuries, the victim managed to escape. However, Prowell allegedly pursued him in a vehicle, striking the man and breaking his leg. The victim survived the attack, becoming the only known individual to escape the suspect's alleged killing spree. Investigators later revealed that, at the time of the 2025 assault, Prowell had already been on probation in 2 separate cases. Those cases involved a string of burglaries committed between 2019 and 2021 in Beverly Hills and other areas of Los Angeles. Prosecutors said the prior offenses highlighted a long-standing disregard for the law and helped establish a broader pattern of criminal behavior. Authorities stated that the online dating app played a central role in each incident, allowing the suspect to gain his victim's trust before isolating them. Investigators emphasized that the crimes were not random but deliberate, involving planning, deception, and escalating violence. If convicted on all charges, Prowell faced the possibility of the death penalty or life in state prison without the chance of parole. Prosecutors said a final decision on whether to pursue capital punishment would be made at a later date. Relatives of a young Utah woman spoke publicly after police said she was brutally killed following a meeting arranged through the dating app Tinder. In a statement released shortly after her death, the family described the suspect as someone capable of extreme cruelty and said the crime had irreversibly shattered their lives. Ashlyn Black was 25 years old when police said she was choked and stabbed to death inside a home in Layton, Utah. According to investigators, she had met the suspect through the dating app and agreed to meet him for drinks. What was expected to be a casual evening turned into a violent and fatal encounter that left a family devastated and a community in shock. Her family said the loss of their daughter had permanently altered their lives. They described the crime as pointless and deeply evil, stating that their heartbreak was overwhelming and enduring. The grief, they explained, created an emptiness that time could never repair, leaving a lasting wound for everyone who loved her. Ashlyn was remembered as a joyful and compassionate person who cared deeply about others. Her family said she had a passion for advocating for those who were unable to speak up for themselves and possessed a natural ability to work with people who had special needs. They emphasized that she brought warmth and positivity into the lives of those around her, and that her absence left a profound void among friends and relatives. Authorities arrested 24-year-old Ethan Hunsaker on suspicion of murder. He was taken into custody and held without bail, though formal charges had not yet been filed at the time. Court records did not indicate whether he was represented by legal counsel, and police were unable to find a working phone number associated with him. Layton police said the motive behind the attack was still under investigation. However, early findings suggested that the violence had not been provoked. According to a probable cause statement, Ashlyn and Hunsaker met for drinks on a Saturday night after connecting on Tinder. Later that evening, they went to Hunsaker's home in Layton, a city located roughly 25 miles north of Salt Lake City. The situation escalated rapidly once they arrived at the residence. Police said Hunsaker himself called 911 to report that he had killed someone inside his home. During the call, he urged dispatchers to instruct responding officers to shoot him. Authorities stated that he repeated the same request after police arrived at the scene, continuing to express a desire to be killed. When officers entered the home, they found Ashlyn lying on the floor with multiple stab wounds. Emergency medical personnel attempted to revive her, but she was pronounced dead at the scene due to the severity of her injuries. The condition of her body indicated that the attack had been violent and sustained. Investigators reported that Hunsaker told police he experienced persistent thoughts of harming himself and others. According to the probable cause document, he had previously been diagnosed with an unspecified mental illness. Law enforcement officials said his mental health history was being examined as part of the ongoing investigation, though no further details were released. News of Ashlyn's death sent shockwaves through the Layton community and sparked renewed conversations about the risks associated with meeting strangers through online dating platforms. For many, the case highlighted how quickly an ordinary social interaction could turn dangerous. For Ashlyn's family, the tragedy was more than a criminal case. It was a life-altering loss that forever changed their reality. They emphasized that she should be remembered not solely for how she died, but for how she lived, as a caring, generous, and loving individual who made a meaningful difference in the lives of others. Friends and loved ones shared memories of her kindness, her laughter, and her dedication to helping vulnerable individuals. Her family said those memories now stood alongside unbearable grief as they struggled to come to terms with a future without her. As investigators continued working to piece together the events leading up to her death, Ashlyn's loved ones were left navigating the aftermath of a crime that defied logic and understanding. What was meant to be a simple evening out had ended in devastating violence, leaving behind unanswered questions and lasting sorrow. A DeLand man who killed a well-known Daytona Beach restaurant manager after a chance meeting on a dating app was sentenced to 45 years in prison, bringing a grim conclusion to a case that shocked the local community. Michael Harris Jr., who was 22 years old at the time of sentencing, pleaded guilty to the murder of Bobby Scott, a popular manager at Caribbean Jack's restaurant. The crime, prosecutors said, began with what appeared to be an ordinary online interaction, but quickly spiraled into fatal violence. Harris did not testify during the sentencing hearing. Instead, his defense relied on statements from his attorney and a forensic psychologist, who spoke about his mental and emotional state. The psychologist told the court that Harris had expressed remorse during their sessions and struggled to understand his own actions. According to her testimony, Harris said he could not explain why he committed the murder and felt overwhelming self-loathing for what he had done. Prosecutors detailed how Scott met Harris through a dating app in January 2021. After the two arranged to meet, Scott never returned home, prompting growing concern among his loved ones. When days passed without contact, his family reported him missing, setting off a search that ended in tragedy. Scott's body was later discovered in a wooded area near Old New York Avenue in D-Land. Authorities said he had been severely beaten, and the condition of his body indicated a violent and sustained attack. The discovery devastated those who knew him, particularly co-workers and patrons who remembered him as a friendly and familiar presence at the popular waterfront restaurant. Not long after Scott's body was found, investigators located Harris driving the victim's vehicle. Inside the car, police discovered blood evidence that further linked Harris to the killing. The findings solidified the case against him and led to his arrest. During the sentencing hearing, Scott's sister addressed the court, urging the judge to impose the harshest sentence possible. She said the family did not want another family to endure the same kind of pain and loss caused by Harris's actions. Her statement reflected the deep grief and anger felt by Scott's loved ones, who were left to cope with the sudden and violent loss of a brother, son, and friend. Judge Elizabeth Blackburn ultimately sentenced Harris to 45 years in the Florida Department of Corrections, just 5 years short of the maximum penalty allowed under the reduced charge. In delivering the sentence, the judge acknowledged testimony presented by the defense that Harris had faced numerous hardships throughout his young life. She recognized that his upbringing had been marked by instability and challenges that may have influenced the path he took. However, the judge made it clear that those factors did not excuse the crime. She described the murder of Bobby Scott as senseless and emphasized that Harris's actions were not impulsive or accidental. According to the court, Harris carried out a brutal attack and then made a series of deliberate decisions both during and after the killing, indicating intent and awareness rather than confusion or loss of control. The judge noted that the calculated nature of Harris's behavior following the murder further supported the severity of the sentence. She stressed that the court could not overlook the purposeful steps he took in the aftermath, including his use of the victim's vehicle. Harris's mother and sister were present in the courtroom for the sentencing but did not speak on his behalf. They left quietly after the judge announced the sentence, offering no public reaction. Originally, Harris had been indicted on a charge of first-degree murder, which carried the possibility of life in prison. As part of a plea agreement, prosecutors reduced the charge to second-degree murder, lowering the maximum possible sentence to 50 years. In exchange, Harris pleaded guilty, sparing the victim's family a lengthy trial and reliving the details of Scott's death in court. For those who knew Bobby Scott, the sentence offered a measure of justice, but little comfort. His death left a lasting void in the lives of friends, family, and co-workers who remembered him not for how he died, but for the warmth and energy he brought to those around him.